Step into Revenge Kitchen. We're serving betrayal with a side of poetic justice. The coffee was still steaming when I noticed the blueprint. Not just any blueprint, my blueprint. The sustainable office complex I'd been designing for Meridian Industries, complete with the innovative solar grid integration that had taken me 6 months to perfect. But there it was, spread across Trevor Ashford's table at Victrola on Capitol Hill, marked with red annotations in handwriting that made my stomach clench with recognition. Zoey's handwriting. I stood frozen in the coffee shop doorway, watching Seattle's most successful real estate developer study my work with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining X-rays. The morning light streaming through the windows illuminated every detail of the theft with crystalline clarity. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't accident. This was orchestrated. "Donovan, you look like you've seen a ghost." I turned to find my business partner, Dylan Holbrook, carrying 2 cups of their signature dark roast. His weathered face crinkled with concern, crow's feet deepening around eyes that had seen me through 20 years of architectural challenges. But nothing had prepared us for this. "That's the Meridian Project," I said quietly, nodding toward Trevor's table. "My Meridian Project." Dylan followed my gaze, his expression shifting from confusion to sharp focus. In our 2 decades of partnership, I'd learned to read the micro-expressions that crossed his angular features like weather patterns. Right now, storm clouds were gathering. "How the hell does Ashford have your blueprints?" he whispered. The question hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. I could smell the disaster approaching, feel it in the way my chest tightened, and my architect's mind began calculating structural damage. Because there was only one way Trevor Ashford could have those blueprints, complete with Zoey's modifications. My wife was selling me out. The realization hit with the precision of a demolition charge placed at exactly the right load-bearing point. 15 years of marriage, 20 years of building Blackthorne and Associates from a one-man operation in my apartment to Seattle's premier sustainable architecture firm. And apparently, I'd been living with a saboteur the entire time. "We need to leave," I said, turning away before Trevor could notice us. "Now." But as we walked toward the exit, I heard him speaking into his phone, his voice carrying just enough for me to catch fragments. "The solar integration is brilliant. Zoey assured me we could implement this by fall. Yes, the Bellingham project will be perfect." My hands were trembling by the time we reached Dylan's truck. Not from fear, from the cold fury that comes when an analytical mind finally has enough data to see the complete picture. Because in that moment, I understood that this wasn't just about stolen blueprints. This was about systematic, calculated demolition of everything I'd built. And Zoey had been swinging the wrecking ball all along. The drive back to our Pioneer Square offices passed in contemplative silence. Dylan knew better than to push when I was processing, and I needed every neuron firing to piece together what I'd just witnessed. My mind worked like it did when designing complex structures, identifying load-bearing elements, stress points, potential failures. The Blackthorne and Associates building rose before us, 12 stories of glass and steel that I'd personally designed 7 years ago. Every angle calculated for maximum natural light, every material chosen for both sustainability and longevity. It was my professional legacy made manifest, and apparently it was under siege. "Luna's in early again," Dylan observed as we rode the elevator to the 9th floor. Through the glass walls of my office, I could see our junior architect hunched over her computer, auburn hair falling across her face as she worked. Luna Chen was brilliant, 28 years old with an intuitive understanding of sustainable design that reminded me of myself at her age. She joined our firm 6 months ago, bringing fresh perspectives and a work ethic that impressed even Dylan. But as I watched her working at her computer, something nagged at the edges of my consciousness. A detail out of place, like a measurement that didn't quite align with the others. "Morning, Mr. Blackthorne," Luna called as I passed her desk. Her smile was warm, genuine, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of what? Guilt, anxiety. "Morning, Luna. Working on the Meridian budget projections." "Actually," she hesitated, glancing between Dylan and me. "I found some discrepancies in the accounts. Nothing major, but I thought you should know." The cold fury in my chest crystallized into sharp focus. "What kind of discrepancies?" Luna pulled up spreadsheets on her dual monitors, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. Materials costs that don't match our suppliers' invoices, consultant fees that seem elevated, and there are several payments to a company called Ravencroft Design Solutions that I can't find any contracts for. Ravencroft, Zoe's maiden name. The pieces were falling into place with the inevitable precision of architectural physics. My wife wasn't just stealing my blueprints. She was bleeding my company dry while building her own competitive firm. And Luna, brilliant Luna with her keen eye for financial details, had just handed me the evidence I needed. "Pull everything," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. "Every invoice, every payment, every consultant fee from the past 18 months. I want a complete audit by end of business today." Luna nodded, but I caught something else in her expression, a flicker of what almost looked like relief. As if she'd been waiting for this moment, hoping I'd finally notice what was hiding in plain sight. "Dylan," I continued, "cancel my afternoon meetings. We're going to war." War, I'd learned over 2 decades of business, required intelligence gathering before the first shot was fired. While Luna compiled financial records with the methodical precision of a forensic accountant, I retreated to my office to examine what I thought I knew about my own life. Zoey Ravencroft, now Blackthorne, had entered my world 15 years ago like morning light through perfectly positioned windows. I was 33, ambitious but lonely, pouring 18-hour days into building my reputation in Seattle's competitive architectural scene. She was 30, elegant, and working as an interior designer for one of the firms that regularly collaborated with mine. Our first meeting had been at a project review for the Westfield Shopping Center renovation, my first major commercial contract. I'd been nervous, overprepared, armed with 3 backup sets of blueprints and enough technical specifications to build a small city. Zoey had been there representing Meridian Interiors, and when she'd suggested integrating living walls into my design to enhance the sustainable aesthetic, I'd been struck by both her insight and her smile. "You think like an ecosystem," she'd said after the meeting, lingering behind as other contractors packed up their materials. "Most architects design buildings, you design living spaces." The compliment had landed like a perfectly placed foundation stone, solid and supportive and exactly what I'd needed to hear. Within a month, we were dating. Within a year, we were living together. Within 3 years, we were married in a small ceremony at Pike Place Market, surrounded by friends and colleagues who proclaimed us the perfect match. But now, staring at the financial discrepancies Luna had uncovered, I began to see that perfect match through a different lens. How convenient that Zoey had specialized in sustainable design when that was my emerging niche. How fortunate that she'd had connections with exactly the right suppliers and consultants. How serendipitous that she'd always encouraged me to share details about my projects, to trust her insights about client relationships and business strategy. I'd thought she was supporting my dreams. Apparently, she'd been studying them. My computer chimed with an email from Luna, "Financial audit complete. You need to see this immediately." The attached spreadsheet was a masterpiece of forensic accounting, color-coded and cross-referenced with the precision I demanded in architectural drawings. Over 18 months, nearly $400,000 had been systematically diverted from Blackthorne and Associates to Ravencroft Design Solutions. Payments disguised as consultant fees, inflated material costs with kickbacks, even charges for research and development that had apparently funded Zoey's competing business. But the financial theft was just the foundation. Luna had also identified 12 major clients who'd suddenly canceled contracts or decided to go in a different direction over the past year. 12 projects that had represented nearly $2 million in potential revenue. Projects that, according to Luna's research, were now being completed by Ravencroft Design Solutions in partnership with Ashford Development. My wife hadn't just been stealing money, she'd been stealing my future. "There's more," Luna said, appearing in my doorway with another stack of printouts. Her usually confident demeanor had been replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "I found communications between Ravencroft Design and several of your former clients. Zoey has been disparaging your work, suggesting that Blackthorne and Associates is financially unstable, that you're losing your creative edge, that clients would be better served by a more innovative firm." The betrayal cut deeper than mere theft. Zoey hadn't just been stealing from me, she'd been systematically destroying my professional reputation to create opportunities for herself. Every dinner conversation about my work stress, every gentle suggestion that I might be pushing too hard, every offer to help with client relations, It had all been intelligence gathering for her campaign of professional assassination. "Luna," I said carefully, "how did you know to look for this? Financial auditing isn't exactly standard practice for junior architects." She met my eyes directly, and I saw steel beneath the surface that I'd somehow missed before. "Because I've seen this pattern before, Mr. Blackthorne. My stepmother used similar tactics when she destroyed my father's business 10 years ago. I recognized the warning signs." The room went very quiet. Through the glass walls of my office, I could see Dylan on a call, probably handling the clients I was supposed to meet with this afternoon. Normal business continuing while my world underwent controlled demolition. "Your stepmother," I said slowly. Luna nodded, her jaw tight with old anger. "Zoey Ravencroft. She married my father when I was 18, spent 5 years studying his construction company, then systematically destroyed it while building her own competing business. He lost everything, his company, his house, his reputation. He died of a heart attack 2 years later, and I've always believed the stress of her betrayal contributed to it." The final piece clicked into place with architectural precision. Luna hadn't stumbled across financial irregularities by accident. She'd been watching, waiting, gathering evidence against the woman who destroyed her family. And I'd been the unwitting beneficiary of her investigation. "So when you applied to work here 6 months ago—" "I knew exactly who I was looking for," Luna said quietly. "I've been tracking Zoe's activities for years, waiting for her to reveal her next target. When I saw that she'd married a successful architect and was starting to make connections in the sustainable design market, I knew she was planning another long-term operation. I didn't expect to actually care about the victim this time." The admission hung in the air between us like the moment before a controlled demolition, when the charges are set and everyone holds their breath. Luna had infiltrated my company to gather intelligence against my wife. But somewhere along the way, her mission of revenge had become something more complicated. "What's your endgame, Luna?" She straightened her shoulders, and I saw her father's daughter, determined, methodical, and absolutely unforgiving when it came to justice. Complete exposure of her financial fraud, business sabotage, and professional misconduct. I want her destroyed the way she destroyed my father, and I want you to help me do it. For the first time since I'd seen my blueprints on Trevor Ashford's table, I smiled. It wasn't a particularly warm smile, more like the satisfaction an architect feels when all the calculations finally align. Because Luna had just offered me something more valuable than revenge. She'd offered me a partner who understood exactly what we were up against. That evening, I drove home to Magnolia with the measured calm of a man preparing for surgery on his own life. The house Zoe and I had shared for 8 years sat perched on a bluff overlooking Elliott Bay, every angle of its contemporary design optimized for views and natural light. I'd spent months perfecting the plans, ensuring that our bedroom would catch the sunrise and the kitchen would glow with golden hour light during dinner preparation. Now the house felt like a crime scene waiting to be processed. Zoe was in the kitchen when I arrived, stirring something aromatic on the stove while classical music played softly from hidden speakers. She'd changed from her morning designer outfit into yoga pants and a cashmere sweater, auburn hair pulled back in the effortless style that had first caught my attention 15 years ago. The domestic scene was picture perfect, like something from an architectural magazine showcasing modern living. Which, I realized, was exactly the impression she'd always been trying to create. "You're home early," she said, glancing up with a smile that no longer seemed warm so much as calculated. "I thought you had client meetings all afternoon." "Canceled them," I replied, setting my laptop bag on the kitchen island with deliberate care. "Had some urgent business to handle instead." Something flickered in her amber eyes, a micro-expression that lasted perhaps 1/10 of a second before her practiced smile returned. But I caught it, filed it away with all the other details I'd been unconsciously cataloging for months without realizing their significance. "Everything okay? You seem tense." Zoe moved closer, one hand reaching to touch my shoulder in a gesture that had always been soothing. Tonight, it felt like a spider testing the strength of its web. I stepped back, not obviously, but enough to break the contact. "Just some irregularities in the books, nothing I can't handle." Her hand froze in midair for just a moment before dropping to her side. "Irregularities? That sounds serious. Anything I can help with?" The offer was perfectly pitched, concerned wife volunteering to support her stressed husband. But I heard something else underneath it now, a carefully controlled curiosity that reminded me of the way she'd always asked about my projects. Not casual interest, information gathering. Actually, yes, I said, moving to the wine refrigerator and selecting a bottle of the Burgundy we'd been saving for special occasions. If this was going to be the end of my marriage, it deserved decent wine. Tell me about Ravencroft Design Solutions. The kitchen went very quiet. The only sounds were the soft bubbling of whatever she was cooking and the distant hum of Elliott Bay traffic floating through our carefully positioned windows. Zoe's back was to me as she stood at the stove, but I could see her reflection in the brushed steel backsplash. Her face had gone very still. I'm sorry. Ravencroft Design Solutions, I repeated, pulling the cork from the wine with practiced efficiency. Luna found several payments to them in our company accounts. Consultant fees, I believe. Since that's your maiden name, I thought you might know something about it. When she turned to face me, her expression was a masterpiece of confusion and hurt, the perfect response of an innocent woman wrongly accused. But I'd spent 15 years learning to read the micro-expressions that crossed her face, and I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. Donovan, I don't understand what you're asking me. I'm asking if you've been stealing from my company to fund a competing business. The accusation hung in the air like a suspended steel beam, heavy and unforgiving. Zoe's eyes widened, and for a moment I saw something that might have been her true face, sharp, assessing, coldly furious. Then the mask of wounded innocence snapped back into place. How can you even say that? After 15 years, how can you accuse me of? Because I saw the blueprints, Zoey. She went very still. Through the kitchen windows, the lights of Seattle were beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky, and I found myself thinking about how many hours I'd spent designing this house to frame that exact view. How many evenings we'd stood together in this kitchen, watching the city lights reflect on the water while we talked about our days, our dreams, our shared future. All of it built on lies. What blueprints? She asked quietly. My blueprints for the Meridian Project, in Trevor Ashford's possession this morning, complete with your handwritten modifications. Zoe closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, the wounded wife was gone. What looked back at me was someone I'd never seen before, someone calculating and cold and utterly without remorse. How long have you known? She asked. The question was delivered with the casual curiosity of someone asking about the weather. No denials, no tears, no desperate attempts to explain away the evidence. Just pragmatic assessment of damage control options. Since this morning, I said. Though Luna's been tracking the financial theft for months, apparently. Interesting hire, by the way. Did you know she's your stepdaughter? That got a reaction. Zoe's composure cracked just enough for me to see genuine surprise underneath. Luna Chen is David's daughter. David died 2 years after you destroyed his construction company. Heart attack brought on by stress, according to Luna. She's been hunting you ever since. Zoe sank into one of our kitchen bar stools, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely rattled. I didn't know David had died. Did you care? She met my eyes directly. No, not really. David was weak. He let emotion cloud his business judgment just like you're doing now. The casual cruelty of the admission was breathtaking. This woman I'd shared a bed with for 15 years was discussing the destruction of her previous husband with the detached professionalism of an architect discussing demolition plans. So what now? I asked. Do you deny everything, claim I'm having some kind of breakdown, try to turn our friends against me while you complete whatever endgame you've been planning? Zoe poured herself a glass of the wine I'd opened, her movements precise and unhurried. When she spoke, her voice carried the cool authority of someone accustomed to being in control. What I've been planning, Donovan, is independence. Freedom from playing the supportive wife to a man who's too trusting for his own good. I've spent 15 years in your shadow, watching you get credit for ideas I helped develop, seeing you celebrated for innovations I contributed to. Did you really think I was going to spend the rest of my life as Mrs. Donovan Blackthorne, interior designer and architectural wife? So you decided to steal my clients and destroy my business instead. I decided to build my own empire using everything you taught me. The clients came with me because I offered them something you couldn't: vision without ego, innovation without your obsessive need to control every detail. Trevor's developments are going to reshape Seattle's skyline, and Ravencroft Design is going to be the architectural firm that makes it happen. She paused, taking a sip of wine before continuing with surgical precision. What I didn't expect was Luna. That complicates things. How so? Zoe's smile was sharp as broken glass. Because now I have to decide whether it's worth the effort to destroy you completely, or whether I should just take what I've already got and disappear. The casual way she discussed my destruction sent ice through my veins. This wasn't the breakdown of a marriage. This was the revelation that I'd been living with a predator for 15 years. Someone who had studied me, learned my weaknesses, and systematically stripped away everything I'd built while I slept beside her every night. And Trevor, I asked, what's he getting out of this partnership besides stolen blueprints? Her laugh was genuinely amused. Trevor thinks he's manipulating me. Poor man believes that charming smile and expensive dinners have seduced me into providing inside information about my husband's business. He has no idea that I recruited him specifically for his connections and his capital. Men are so predictable when they think they're being clever. The admission was delivered with the satisfied precision of a master craftsman explaining a particularly elegant solution to a complex problem. Zoey hadn't just been cheating. She'd been running a multi-year operation that involved recruiting and manipulating everyone around her, including me. How long, I asked, how long have you been planning this? She finished her wine and set the glass down with finality. Since our third date, when you showed me your plans for the eco-residential project in Ballard. I realized then that you had genuine talent, that you were going to be successful, and that success could be harvested, let's say. The marriage was always part of the long-term strategy. 15 years of my life, reduced to a business plan. I thought about all the moments I'd treasured. Late nights working on designs together, celebrating contract wins, planning our childless future in this house overlooking Elliott Bay. All of it had been performance art, calculated to keep me productive and unsuspecting while she mined everything valuable from my life and work. The affair with Trevor, I said, how long? 8 months. Long enough to secure his investment in Ravencroft Design and gain access to his client network. He's actually quite good in bed, which was an unexpected bonus. You've gotten rather predictable over the years. The casual cruelty of the comment was designed to wound, but I found myself analyzing it with detached curiosity instead. Even her insults were calculated for maximum psychological damage. This was a woman who had turned emotional manipulation into an art form. So what happens now? I asked. Zoey stood, smoothing her cashmere sweater with practiced elegance. Now I pack some things and disappear for a few weeks while my lawyer handles the divorce proceedings. Trevor's already provided a very comfortable apartment in his Belltown development, and Ravencroft Design has enough contracts lined up to ensure my independence. You can keep the house. I never liked it anyway. Too many windows, not enough privacy. She paused at the kitchen doorway, turning back with something that might have been genuine curiosity. Do you want to know the funny thing, Donovan? You were actually a better husband than I expected. Attentive, supportive, faithful. Under different circumstances, I might have been content with the life we built together. But you were just too successful, too talented, too trusting. It made you irresistible as a target. And then she was gone, moving through our house with the efficient purpose of someone who had been planning this exit for months. I heard her moving around upstairs, packing whatever she needed for her new life as a successful entrepreneur who had built her empire on the ruins of mine. I stayed in the kitchen, finishing the bottle of Burgundy while Seattle's lights reflected off Elliott Bay like stars scattered across dark water. The house felt different now, not like a home, but like a museum displaying the artifacts of a relationship that had never really existed. Somewhere above me, Zoey was packing her bags. Somewhere across town, Luna was probably still at the office, compiling evidence for the legal battles ahead. And somewhere in Belltown, Trevor Ashford was probably congratulating himself on seducing away another man's wife, never realizing he was just another asset being harvested by a woman who had turned betrayal into a business model. But for the first time in 15 years, I was seeing clearly. And I was done being anyone's victim. The next morning, I walked into Blackthorne and Associates with the focused calm of an architect beginning a complex demolition project. Not the explosive kind that brings buildings down in spectacular clouds of dust, but the methodical deconstruction that salvages every valuable component while systematically dismantling the structure that can no longer stand. Luna was already at her desk, surrounded by enough printouts and legal documents to file a small library. She looked up when I approached, her dark eyes sharp with exhaustion and determination. "She's gone," I said without preamble. "I know, I've been monitoring the bank account since 6 a.m. She cleaned out the joint savings, about $80,000, but left the business accounts untouched. Probably doesn't want to trigger automated fraud alerts before she's safely relocated." The efficiency of Luna's surveillance was both impressive and slightly unsettling. But then, I was learning that the quiet junior architect I'd hired 6 months ago was actually a woman who had spent years planning the destruction of my wife. Under the circumstances, unsettling felt like exactly what I needed. "What's our next move?" I asked. Luna gestured to her computer screen, which displayed what looked like an organizational chart crossed with a military battle plan. Names, dates, financial flows, and relationship connections mapped out in precise detail. "Complete exposure," she said. "But not just Zoey, the entire network she's built. Trevor Ashford, the clients she's turned against you, the suppliers who have been inflating invoices, all of it. We're going to dismantle her operation piece by piece and make sure everyone knows exactly what they've been supporting." Dylan chose that moment to arrive with coffee and the morning's bad news. "Channel 7 wants to interview you about the Meridian project cancellation. Apparently, word is getting out that we've lost several major clients, and they're spinning it as a story about Seattle's architecture scene becoming more competitive." I accepted the coffee but not the narrative. Who's feeding them information? Ravencroft Design Solutions issued a press release this morning announcing their partnership with Ashford Development. Very professional, very modest, just a small firm helping to meet the growing demand for sustainable design in Seattle. But they mentioned several projects that sound suspiciously familiar. Luna pulled up the press release on her screen, and we read it together. The language was carefully crafted to avoid direct claims while strongly implying that Ravencroft Design was an innovative new player stepping in to serve clients who were looking for fresh approaches to sustainable architecture. Between the lines, anyone in the industry would understand that this was about Blackthorne and associates losing market share to younger, more creative competition. "She's good," Dylan admitted grudgingly. "This makes it look like natural business evolution rather than corporate espionage." "She's had 15 years to study how I handle public relations," I replied. "Of course she knows exactly how to position this to maximum advantage." But as I read Zoey's press release, I began to see the structural weaknesses in her carefully constructed narrative. She was presenting Ravencroft Design as a startup, but the projects she was claiming required years of development and established relationships with major clients. The timeline didn't add up, and anyone who looked closely would start asking uncomfortable questions about how a brand new firm had managed to secure such significant contracts. "Luna, I need you to prepare a comprehensive report documenting every financial irregularity you've found. Timeline, amounts, evidence of unauthorized fund transfers. Make it bulletproof, the kind of thing that would hold up in both civil and criminal court." "Already working on it. Should be complete by this afternoon." "Good, Dylan, I want you to reach out to every client we've lost in the past 18 months. Don't try to win them back. Just ask for honest feedback about why they chose to go in a different direction. Document everything they tell you." Dylan nodded, but I could see concern in his weathered features. "Donovan, what are you planning?" I turned to look out the windows of our office, watching Seattle wake up on another overcast morning. Somewhere in this city, Zoey was probably meeting with Trevor to celebrate their successful operation. Somewhere else, former clients were working with stolen designs while congratulating themselves on discovering innovative new talent. And in offices throughout the city, architects and developers were reading that press release and drawing their own conclusions about Blackthorne and Associates' declining relevance. "I'm going to destroy her," I said quietly. "Not with explosions or drama, but with the same methodical precision she used to destroy me. Every lie exposed, every theft documented, every manipulation revealed. By the time I'm finished, Ravencroft Design Solutions won't just be closed. It'll be a cautionary tale about the consequences of corporate espionage." Luna's smile was sharp with anticipation. "Good. She destroyed my father with lies and manipulation. It's time she learned what happens when someone fights back with facts and documentation. Dr. Isabel Cross arrived at our offices 2 hours later, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and wearing the kind of quietly expensive suit that suggested she was very good at her job. Forensic accounting wasn't exactly a glamorous profession, but the woman Dylan had recommended moved with the confident precision of someone who had dismantled corporate fraud operations from Seattle to Singapore. "Mr. Blackthorne," she said, offering a handshake that was firm without being performative. "I've reviewed the preliminary materials Ms. Chen provided. This is significantly more complex than typical embezzlement." Luna had cleared one of our conference rooms and transformed it into what looked like a war room crossed with a forensic laboratory. Financial documents covered every available surface, organized with the same attention to detail I demanded in architectural drawings. Timeline charts traced the flow of money and information over 18 months, while relationship diagrams mapped the connections between all the players in Zoey's operation. "Walk us through what you found," I said. Dr. Cross moved to the timeline chart, her movements economical and purposeful. She was probably in her mid-40s, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of focused intelligence that made her seem like she was always thinking 3 steps ahead. "This wasn't opportunistic theft," she began. "This was a systematic, long-term operation designed to transfer maximum value while maintaining plausible deniability. The financial diversions were structured to stay below federal reporting thresholds. The timing coincided with your busiest project periods when you'd be less likely to notice irregularities, and the money was moved through multiple accounts to obscure the ultimate destination." She pointed to a series of transactions highlighted in red. "But the financial theft was just phase 1. Phase 2 involved using your resources to build relationships with your clients and suppliers. Invoices were inflated, with the overages going to Ravencroft Design as consulting fees, while Ms. Blackthorne built credibility as someone who could deliver high-quality work at competitive prices." "And phase 3, Dylan asked. "Client poaching through reputation destruction. Ms. Chen found evidence of a coordinated campaign to suggest that Blackthorne and Associates was becoming unreliable. Projects running over budget, missed deadlines, quality control issues. None of it was true, but the rumors created doubt that made clients receptive when Ravencroft Design approached them with alternatives." Dr. Cross paused at a photograph Luna had printed from social media, Zoey and Trevor at what looked like a high-end restaurant, both smiling confidently at the camera. "The affair with Mr. Ashford provided access to his client network and development capital, but the relationship was clearly strategic rather than romantic. Text message metadata suggests their personal interactions were scheduled around business objectives. The clinical presentation of my wife's betrayal should have been devastating. Instead, I found myself admiring the sheer professional competence of Dr. Cross's analysis. This was what I needed, cold facts and clear evidence rather than emotional processing." "What's the financial damage?" I asked. "Direct theft of approximately $400,000 over 18 months. Indirect losses from canceled contracts and reputation damage. Conservatively, $2.3 million in potential revenue. But the real damage is structural. She's undermined your position in the sustainable architecture market just as that sector is experiencing massive growth." Luna pulled up another chart, this one showing market projections for sustainable commercial development in the Pacific Northwest. The numbers were staggering, billions of dollars in projects over the next decade, with Seattle positioned to be a major hub for innovative green building. "Zoey timed this perfectly," Luna said. "She's positioned Ravencroft Design to capture market share just as demand explodes, while simultaneously damaging your reputation in a sector you helped pioneer." The scope of the operation was breathtaking. This wasn't just a cheating wife stealing money. This was industrial espionage executed with the precision of a master strategist. Zoey had identified a growth market, studied the dominant player, and systematically dismantled him to clear space for her own empire. "So what's our counter-strategy?" I asked. Dr. Cross opened her briefcase and withdrew a thick folder bound with red tape. "Complete exposure through multiple channels. Criminal complaint for wire fraud and corporate espionage. Civil lawsuit for theft of intellectual property and intentional interference with business relationships. Professional ethics complaints to the American Institute of Architects and the Washington State Department of Licensing, and strategic release of evidence to trade publications and local media. "That sounds like total war," Dylan observed. "Because it is," Luna replied. "Zoey spent years building this operation. The only way to stop her is to destroy it so completely that no one will ever trust her again." I studied the materials Dr. Cross had prepared, feeling the familiar satisfaction that came when complex problems resolved into clear solutions. This was how I approached difficult architectural challenges: identify the core structural issues, develop comprehensive solutions, execute with methodical precision. "How long will this take?" "The criminal complaint can be filed this afternoon. Civil proceedings will take months, but we can seek emergency injunctions to freeze assets and prevent further damage. Professional sanctions. Those take time, but they're permanent. Once someone's professional credentials are revoked for fraud, they don't come back." Dr. Cross paused, studying my face with the careful attention of someone accustomed to reading complex reactions. "Mr. Blackthorne, I need you to understand what you're committing to. This isn't just about recovering stolen money. You're going to destroy your wife's life, along with everyone who helped her. There's no going back once we start this process." The question hung in the air like a support beam waiting to be placed. Through the conference room windows, I could see Seattle's skyline, buildings I'd helped design, projects that represented years of careful work and professional relationships. Zoey had tried to steal that from me, to reduce 20 years of building and creating to raw material for her own ambitions. "She made the choice to destroy our marriage for business advantage," I said finally. "I'm just choosing to respond with the same level of strategic thinking." Luna's smile was sharp with satisfaction. "Then let's get to work." The Seattle Police Department's white-collar crime unit occupied a floor of the downtown precinct that looked more like a corporate office than a law enforcement facility. Detective Sarah Patel met us in a conference room equipped with the kind of technology I associated with architectural presentations: multiple monitors, high-resolution projectors, and enough computing power to analyze complex data sets in real time. "This is the most sophisticated corporate espionage case I've seen in 15 years, Detective Patel said after reviewing Dr. Cross's evidence presentation. She was younger than I'd expected, probably early 30s, with the focused energy of someone who had built her career on taking down financial criminals. The coordination between multiple parties, the systematic theft of intellectual property, the timeline. This was planned and executed like a military operation. Luna had prepared visual presentations that mapped Zoey's operation with the same precision I used for architectural drawings. Financial flows, communication timelines, relationship networks, all of it documented with bulletproof evidence that would hold up under legal scrutiny. "The key element," Detective Patel continued, "is proving intent to commit fraud rather than simple marital discord. That's where Mr. Ashford becomes crucial." She pulled up text messages that Dr. Cross had recovered from company phones and computers. Trevor and Zoey's communications painted a clear picture of coordination between theft from Blackthorne and associates and development of competing business relationships. "Trevor, the Bellingham project specifications you provided are exactly what we need for the waterfront development. Can you guarantee Blackthorne won't be able to compete for the contract?" "Zoey, Donovan thinks the project is still in preliminary planning. He won't even know it's available until after we've submitted our proposal. By then, his reputation issues will make him uncompetitive anyway." "Trevor, what reputation issues?" "Zoey, the ones I'm creating. Give me another month and half, his client base will have concerns about working with Blackthorne and associates." Reading the messages was like watching security footage of my own assassination. Every conversation I'd had with Zoey about work stress, difficult clients, or market challenges had been intelligence gathering for her campaign against me. "This establishes clear intent to defraud," Detective Patel explained. "But more importantly, it shows conspiracy between multiple parties to commit industrial espionage. That elevates this from a domestic dispute to a serious white-collar crime." Dr. Cross had also prepared financial evidence that traced stolen funds through multiple accounts and shell companies. Zoey had been careful, but not careful enough to hide from a forensic accountant who specialized in untangling complex financial crimes. "The money trail leads to business investments that directly compete with Mr. Blackthorne's company," Dr. Cross explained. That proves the theft wasn't personal, it was strategic. She stole from him specifically to fund operations that would destroy his livelihood. Detective Patel made notes on a legal pad, her handwriting quick and efficient. Mr. Blackthorne, I need you to understand that criminal prosecution will make all of this public record. Your personal life, your business relationships, your financial situation, everything will be scrutinized in court and potentially in the media. She already destroyed my privacy when she decided to steal from me, I replied. At this point, I just want to make sure she faces consequences for her actions. Then we'll file charges this afternoon. Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, theft of intellectual property, and criminal interference with business relationships. Washington State takes corporate espionage seriously, especially when it involves systematic theft from small businesses. Luna leaned forward, her expression intense. What about Trevor Ashford? Accomplice to fraud, conspiracy, potentially money laundering if we can prove he knew the source of the funds he was receiving. Real estate developers are supposed to conduct due diligence on their business partners. If he was willfully ignorant about where Ms. Ravencroft's resources came from, that's still criminal negligence. The scope of charges was satisfying in its comprehensiveness. Zoey had spent years building her operation, but she'd also created an extensive paper trail that would support multiple felony convictions. How long before she's arrested? Dylan asked. We'll issue warrants this afternoon. She's probably staying at one of Mr. Ashford's properties, so we'll coordinate arrests to happen simultaneously. Maximum impact, minimum opportunity for evidence destruction or flight. Detective Patel gathered the evidence materials Dr. Cross had prepared, each document tagged and organized for legal proceedings. Mr. Blackthorne, you should know that this investigation will probably take months to complete. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny and stress? I thought about the question while looking out at Seattle's downtown core. Somewhere in this city, Zoey was probably congratulating herself on successfully escaping a marriage she'd never valued while positioning herself for long-term business success. She'd spent years playing a game where she held all the cards, and I didn't even know we were competing. But now the rules had changed. Now she was going to learn what happened when someone fought back with facts instead of manipulation, with evidence instead of emotional terrorism. I've spent my career building things that last, I said finally. This is just another construction project. The arrests happened at 6 p.m. on a Thursday evening, coordinated to catch both Zoey and Trevor at their respective locations before they could communicate or destroy evidence. Detective Patel called me as I was leaving the office, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who had executed a complex operation flawlessly. We got them both. Ms. Ravencroft was at the Belltown apartment, Mr. Ashford at his downtown office. Neither resisted, but both immediately demanded lawyers. Luna was still at her desk when I hung up, surrounded by the same evidence materials we'd been organizing for weeks. But now the paper trail of financial theft and corporate espionage was evidence in active criminal cases rather than just documentation of personal betrayal. It's done, I told her. She looked up from her computer, dark eyes bright with something that looked like relief mixed with anticipation. How do you feel? The question was more complex than it appeared. How did I feel about watching my wife of 15 years get arrested for systematically destroying everything I'd built? How did I feel about learning that our entire relationship had been an extended con game? How did I feel about rebuilding my professional reputation from the wreckage of her sabotage? Like an architect who just finished demolishing a structurally unsound building, I said finally, ready to start construction on something better. Luna's smile was sharp with understanding. She'd spent years planning this moment, tracking the woman who had destroyed her father and waiting for the opportunity to strike back. Now Zoey was facing felony charges that would likely result in years of prison time and permanent professional disgrace. What happens next? Luna asked. Now we rebuild. But first, we make sure everyone knows exactly what they were supporting when they worked with Ravencroft Design Solutions. Dylan had prepared press releases for the major trade publications and local business journals, carefully crafted to present the facts without editorial commentary. The evidence would speak for itself. Systematic theft, corporate espionage, and conspiracy to commit fraud, all documented with the kind of detail that would make criminal conviction almost inevitable. But I had one more stop to make before the story became public. The Ashford development offices occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower in South Lake Union, with views of Elliott Bay that probably cost more per square foot than most people's entire apartments. I'd been here before, back when Trevor and I had maintained friendly professional relationships, and I'd had no idea he was helping my wife destroy my business. The receptionist looked nervous when I appeared in the lobby at 7 p.m., probably because news of Trevor's arrest had already circulated through the office. Corporate executives getting led away in handcuffs tended to create workplace anxiety, even in industries accustomed to aggressive business practices. "I'm here to see Rebecca Martinez," I told her. Rebecca was Trevor's vice president of development, a sharp woman in her 50s who had built her reputation on identifying promising architectural talent and matching them with appropriate projects. Rebecca met me in her office, which was decorated with architectural models and design awards from projects throughout the Pacific Northwest. She'd always been professional in our previous interactions, but tonight she looked like someone who had spent the day managing a corporate crisis. "Donovan," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk, "I assume you're here about Trevor and the situation." "I'm here because I want you to understand exactly what situation your company has been supporting," I replied, handing her a folder containing copies of the evidence Dr. Cross had prepared. Rebecca opened the folder and began reading, her expression growing increasingly grim as she worked through the documentation. Financial theft, stolen blueprints, systematic sabotage, all of it traced back to business relationships that Ashford Development had facilitated and supported. "Jesus," she said finally, "Trevor really believed he was seducing information out of your wife, while she was actually using him to access your client network and development capital. Your company funded a corporate espionage operation without realizing it." Rebecca set the folder aside and rubbed her temples with the weary gesture of someone who was already calculating damage control strategies. "How much of this is going to come out in court?" "All of it. Zoey and Trevor are facing multiple felony charges. The trial will document every transaction, every stolen blueprint, every client who was manipulated into changing architectural firms. Your company's role will be thoroughly examined." The implication hung in the air between us like structural tension waiting to resolve. Ashford Development hadn't intentionally participated in corporate espionage, but they'd been willfully ignorant about the source of their new partner's resources and capabilities. In the architecture and development industries, that kind of negligence could be professionally fatal. "What do you want from me, Donovan?" "I want you to contact every client who switched from Blackthorne and Associates to Ravencroft Design and inform them that they've been working with stolen intellectual property. I want public acknowledgement that Ashford Development was deceived by fraudulent business practices, and I want assurance that you'll cooperate fully with law enforcement to ensure criminal prosecution." Rebecca studied my face with the careful attention of someone who had spent decades negotiating complex business deals. "And in exchange?" "In exchange, I don't file a civil lawsuit claiming that Ashford Development was complicit in corporate espionage. Your company recovers from poor judgment rather than being destroyed for criminal conspiracy." The offer was strategically generous. Rebecca's cooperation would help rebuild my reputation while allowing Ashford Development to survive as a cautionary tale rather than a criminal enterprise. But it also demonstrated that I was thinking strategically rather than emotionally, which would be important for future business relationships. "I'll need to consult with our legal department," Rebecca said. "Of course, but don't take too long. The story breaks in tomorrow's trade publications, and your window for getting ahead of the narrative is closing quickly." I left the Ashford offices with the satisfaction of someone who had just placed the final piece in a complex structural design. Zoe's operation was collapsing under the weight of evidence and legal scrutiny. Her co-conspirators were scrambling to minimize their own liability, and the clients she'd manipulated were about to learn exactly what kind of business practices they'd been supporting. But more importantly, I was no longer the victim of someone else's manipulation. I was the architect of my own recovery, building something stronger from the wreckage of my previous life. 6 months later, I stood in the same coffee shop where I'd first seen my stolen blueprints, watching the morning light stream through windows that framed Elliott Bay in crystalline detail. The space looked exactly the same, but everything else had changed with the systematic precision of a well-executed renovation project. Zoey had pled guilty to multiple felony charges and was serving an 18-month sentence in federal prison, her architectural license permanently revoked, and her reputation destroyed beyond any possibility of recovery. Trevor had received a similar sentence for conspiracy and money laundering, while Ashford Development had survived by cooperating fully with law enforcement and implementing new oversight procedures for business partnerships. Blackthorne and Associates had not only recovered, but expanded, as clients who had been manipulated into leaving returned with apologies and new projects. The criminal trial had generated extensive media coverage that portrayed me as a victim of sophisticated corporate espionage rather than a failing architect, which had actually enhanced my reputation for integrity and professional competence. But the most significant change was sitting across from me at a corner table, reviewing financial projections for our latest sustainable development project. Dr. Isabel Cross had completed her forensic accounting work months ago, but our professional relationship had evolved into something more personal as we'd worked together to rebuild what Zoey had tried to destroy. The Meridian project is ahead of schedule and under budget, Isabel said, looking up from her laptop with the satisfied expression of someone who had helped engineer a comprehensive victory. Your reputation for delivering exceptional work on time has been completely restored. Luna approached our table with coffee for herself and updates on the morning's business. She'd been promoted to senior architect and had become an invaluable partner in both business strategy and long-term planning. Her experience with Zoey's manipulation tactics had made her uniquely qualified to help develop safeguards against future corporate espionage. The Washington Post wants to interview you about corporate fraud prevention, Luna said, settling into the third chair at our table. Apparently, your case has become a model for how small businesses can protect themselves against systematic theft. The irony wasn't lost on me. Zoey's attempt to destroy my career had actually established me as an expert on the very crimes she'd committed against me. Her methodical betrayal had become the foundation for my emergence as a thought leader in business security and professional ethics. Any word from the parole hearing? Isabel asked. Denied, Luna replied with satisfaction. She'll serve the full sentence. The judge cited the systematic nature of her crimes and the extensive damage to multiple victims as factors requiring complete accountability. I sipped my coffee and watched Seattle wake up on another overcast morning, thinking about the architectural principles that had guided both my professional work and personal recovery. Strong foundations, careful planning, attention to structural integrity. The same concepts that created buildings capable of lasting decades also applied to rebuilding a life after betrayal. Zoey had tried to steal my future by systematically dismantling everything I'd built, but she'd underestimated the difference between destroying someone else's work and creating something of your own. Theft required only calculation and opportunity. Building required vision, skill, and the kind of patience that came from genuine commitment to lasting value. So what's next? Isabel asked, her hand finding mine across the table in a gesture that had become natural over months of working together. I looked around the coffee shop where I'd first realized my marriage was built on lies, then out at the city where I'd spent 20 years establishing myself as one of Seattle's premier architects. The view was the same, but I was seeing it through different eyes, not as someone who had been victimized, but as someone who had learned to fight back with facts instead of emotion, with strategy instead of reaction. Next, we build something better, I said. Something that can't be stolen because it's based on genuine relationships and real value instead of manipulation and theft. Luna raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. To new foundations. To structural integrity, Isabel added. I lifted my own cup, thinking about the house I'd designed for Zoey and me with its carefully positioned windows and optimized sight lines. I'd sold it 2 months ago and was designing something new with Isabel, a home built for partnership rather than performance, with foundations deep enough to support whatever storms might come. To building things that last, I said. Through the coffee shop windows, Seattle's skyline stretched toward Elliott Bay, a testament to the accumulated work of generations of architects and builders who had created something permanent from temporary materials. Somewhere in that skyline were buildings I'd helped design, projects that would outlast all the people who had tried to destroy them. Zoey had taught me that even the most intimate relationships could be weaponized against me. But she'd also taught me that I was capable of fighting back with the same methodical precision I brought to my professional work. The difference was that when I built something, I built it to last. And this time, I was building it with people who understood the difference between partnership and predation, between love and strategy, between creating value and stealing it. This time, I was building it right. Well, that escalated quickly. Comment below, hit like, subscribe for more stories, and send this to a friend who enjoys a little chaos with their coffee.